All right, UConn fans, this video is on Nika Muhl, a fan favorite of UConn, and I am going to handicap her chances of making this Seattle Storm roster. And unfortunately for her, I think it's pretty bleak, her chances. But I will get into that and outline why that is the case, and it's not her fault.
It's not your fault.
It's because the WNBA stinks. But before we start, if you enjoy the content, then please consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. So as you've probably gathered from the opening of the video, this video is what I would call expectation management, and that is in regards to Nika Muhl making the Seattle Storm 2024 roster. And I thought this should be done as we've all seen the video of Nika saying goodbye to Gina Auriemma, a nice hug, and him telling her how she will make the team because they drafted her because of her attitude and they want to change the culture in Seattle, which was very, very touching.
I have to get your schedule as soon as you guys are playing.
If I like the team.
Come on, stop. I mean, if you make the team, it'll take you one practice to figure out what you got to do to make the team.
Yeah.
And then you just do that. They drafted you for a reason, so do what they drafted you for. So bring a different culture to them that pros don't have, and
The UConn culture.
bring that UConn culture to them.
And frankly, that is what Gino should be telling his player. But unfortunately, he has no idea on this Seattle Storm roster and who she's going against and their cap circumstances. I am going to go through both of those, and I think by the end of the video, it will be clear to you why it is extremely, extremely unlikely that Muhl will make the Seattle Storm roster. In the Seattle Times, they talk about a great matchup happening in the Storm's training camp between Nika Muhl and Jada Melvin to see who will win the backup point guard position behind Skylar Diggins-Smith. And on paper, it does look pretty good as both players are very similar. So they're both 5'11". Muhl's a little bit more physical versus Jada Melvin, who's a bit more slender and tends to use her speed to slither to the basket. Melvin also has a massive advantage as she is a second-year returning player for the Storm and played under Noelle Quinn, so she knows the offense and the system. But if you're a supporter of Nika Muhl, then you would say, well, she only averaged 10 minutes a game last season, scoring 2.6 points, 1.2 assists, and she only shot 39% from the field and 15% from the three-point line. Whereas Nika helped lead UConn back to the Final Four, averaging just under 7 points, 6.5 assists, 1.3 steals, and shot just over 40% from the three-point line. And you would probably make a case that Nika has more long-term potential than Jada Melvin, just based on her shot alone. But in reality, it's a line ball call, as Melvin is actually younger than Nika Muhl, as Melvin's 21 versus Muhl, who is 23 years old. And in the offseason, Melvin, who is from Australia, she played in the WNBL. That's the local league competition in Australia for the Canberra Capitals. And full disclosure, I live in Canberra and have been to a number of Capitals games. So you might say that I have a rooting interest for Melbourne, but really I am just breaking this down straight down the line. Melbourne is actually really, really good. So with the Capitals last year, she averaged 16 points. She shot 42% from the field, and her three-point percentage was 31%, which is improving. And she's a good player. Like, she's just very solid in terms of impact player, especially in the WNBL, which is a really good league. I would have loved for UConn, instead of touring Europe last year, to come to Australia, as I think they would have gotten much better competition. It would have been very interesting to see them go against some of the WNBL teams, as maybe as well the Australian Institute of Sport team. Those would have been some really good matchups versus those teams they were crushing over in Europe. And now, based on all this, you just might say, hey, I'm in the bag for Melbourne as I'm in Australia, which is fine. but this is already over, not even based on that. It's because of the WNBA and the salary cap. If you look at it, this is just not a fair fight. The minute Nika Muhl was drafted by the Seattle Storm, it was done, it was over, and I will lay it out for you so you can see it in the hard, cold numbers. First, what you need to know is the WNBA has a hard cap. It's not like football where they can manipulate it and cut players and extend contracts. That is not what they do. And currently the WNBA salary cap for the 24 season is $1,463,200. And the WNBA teams have the option of keeping 11 or 12 players. In the case of the Storm, it's pretty obvious it is going to be 11 players. So of the roster of 11, 6 are already pretty much guaranteed to make the squad as they have guaranteed contracts. That would be Jewel Lloyd, Skylar Diggins-Smith, Nneka Ogwumike, Mercedes Russell, Izzy Megdebor, and Sammy Whitcomb. If you add up their salaries, that is $1,109,703. Which leaves $353,497 left for the remaining 5 players. And if you look at their roster, I think 4 of the players that'll make the team are pretty obvious, as they all averaged over 10 minutes a game last season. So obviously Jordan Horston's making the squad as she was a high draft pick. Victoria Vivens averaged 17 minutes last season. The other 2 players would be Joyner Holmes, who's 6'3" and averaged 10 minutes last season, along with Dorothy Funka-Mendiadu, who averaged 13 minutes and is 6'3". I think those 4 will definitely or most probably make the team, although their contracts are not guaranteed. And if you add up those 4 players' salary, it comes to $289,330. And then if you add those salaries with the guaranteed salaries, and you get $1,399,033. So if you take that and subtract it against the salary cap of $1,463,200, do you know what you get? $64,167. And then take a look at Jada Melvin's salary scheduled for this season would be $64,154, which fits under the salary cap. Take a look at Nika Muhl. She would make $67,249. She does not fit. It is over. That is why, unfortunately, she is not making the squad, which stinks because it's not about these players going head to head and seeing who is the best player and a fair competition. No, it's just a shell game versus salary cap. So she was doomed the moment that she was drafted by the Storm. And I'm not going to do one of those videos where I demand more WNBA teams and this is a problem. No, my issue is, and it's so easily correctable because that issue is so much bigger. I don't know their finances. The simple solution to this is just to have one round in the WNBA draft. I said that in my pre-draft, and I still agree with it because basically, if she had a chance to go to any team, then she could pick the best spot where she has a chance, a fair fight to make a roster. But with this, it's done. She doesn't have a fair shot to make the roster. She's drafted there. She has to show up, do the press conference, and everybody's acting like it's a fair battle, but it's not. It's already over even before it starts. Take, for example, Tony Romo. He did not get drafted by the NFL. He was laughing in an interview. He's like, you don't look at who the starting quarterback is when you're undrafted. You look at who their backup point guard is and what the situation is. That's how he wound up choosing Dallas.
He took the least amount of money for the best reason, because he had a great chance of making that team.
I looked at the roster. I thought Dallas gave me the best chance to make it.
And by having 3 rounds, the second and third rounders lose that opportunity of trying to find a team that gives them a good situation versus just being a body brought into training camp to give the veteran somebody to scrimmage against. I mean, in this article, it gives it away. It's difficult to handicap the battle between Melvin and Muhl, considering the 5'11" point guards are often paired together in lineups and haven't played against each other. this week during the portion of the practice open to the media because they already know Muhl is not making the squad. They're not having them go head to head to see who's better. They're just playing spare minutes together. So that is unfortunately why this is a done deal. It's unfortunate. It's not fair, but expectation management. Nika Muhl is not making the Storm roster unless I'm wrong, and the internet's forever and you can mock and make fun of me all you want. Now over to you. Give me your anger and poison and hate for me calling this out and daring to say that she won't make the roster, which I do think is unfortunate. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a good night.